right, so this seems to be a perennial issue is income tax queries and home office expenses. Now we are looking at this from the business point of view as well. So the question that we got was as follows. And the question was that if you are a business, do you have to apply Section 23B and Section 23M? If you are a sole proprietor, if you are a company, are you subject to those restrictions? And the short answer is actually no, right? Because something that is key to Section 23M very specifically requires you to be an individual who's receiving remuneration. So from that point of view, the simple fact that you are deducting expenses related to a home or related to what would traditionally be classed as domestic expenditure is not enough. In order for 23M to apply, you have to have an individual earning remuneration, right? In addition, if you go and look at Section 23B, that one is a restriction which applies simply to the deduction of domestic expenditure. Realistically, for you and me both, is if I am earning or if I am an individual, I am going to have domestic expenditure. And domestic expenditure in the context of our law is looking at basically your personal stuff, the what do you need to live, which would be your home, your vehicle that gets you from point A to B, the stuff you do for fun. That's what we're referring to with domestic expenditure. It's the stuff related to your day-to-day household. It's not the stuff that you use for trade. So inherent in this assumption of home office expenses, and it's a fairly common misconception, and which is why I think it's worth also always coming back to this point, is when we talk about restrictions on the deductibility of home office expenses, we're talking about it in the context of individuals earning remuneration. Because if you are an individual carrying on a trade, then these restrictions won't apply to you. To the extent, caveat, to the extent that you are using those spaces for trade. Because, ultimately a chair I sit on could either be domestic or it could be trade, because it could be the comfy office chair I use to game with because it's fun, or it could be the office chair I use to sit on because I need my desk to do my day job like I am doing today. So we also need to be clear just when we are discussing with clients or in our own terminology and we're talking about home office expenses, that we understand what it is that's meant by the term. The restrictions, the ones that we deal with is, can I claim home office expenses? If you are using it for trade, it's not strictly speaking a home office in the traditional tax sense, but it may be in the dictionary definition sense. All right, so from that point of view, if you are sole prop and you're working for trade purposes, pretty much everything's deductible on a pro rata basis as long as you can show the link to trade. If you are a business and are paying this for your employees, then also, once again, everything is going to be fully deductible because you're going to be able to show that the expenditure was incurred in the production of income, right? So the main restriction, if you're looking at this from a trade and a business point of view, so in other words, again, please note, the individual who is earning remuneration, please go and have a look at our other Tax Cafe recordings dealing with individuals where this is discussed in more detail. There's also a whole bunch of varying additional CPD videos available dealing with specifically the dealing specifically with the individual earning remuneration element of home office expenses. What we do have to consider for income tax purposes is the link to production of income. Right. So to give you an example, if I am working from home, and this is really where the easiest way to understand the difference. Now, I work for myself. I am effectively a sole trader, and I provide consulting and training income, or make my income through the provision of training. services and consulting services. So my income is not remuneration because I'm independent. I have more than one client. 80% doesn't come from one client. If you go and look at the common law tables, I kick out and all those other good things. So I am carrying on a trade and carrying on a business. So my office that you can see around me here, the expenses related to it would be deductible. However, this particular office does also sit in my home. So I have to go and check then and go and say, how much am I using this office for business and how much am I using it for trade? I have my kids who have their computers in my home office because I don't like, let's just say little children, internet and unrestricted access. I don't know, makes me nervous. Call me old school. But they then have the computers in here as well, which means that I'm not using this room and these facilities purely for trade purposes. So when I'm working out the cost that I can deduct, I have to go and say, well, I'm using this room 80% for business, 20% for personal. And that apportionment is going to depend on what I can prove and what I can show to be a reasonable approximation for the work that I'm doing. Right, and for what the usage of this room is. So for me, the fact that I'm not using this room purely for business is fine. It just means I can't claim 100% of my expenses. I have to claim a lower number. Right. If, however, I was looking at it from my employees' point of view and they had a similar setup to mine, my employees would not be able to claim any of the expenses related to that room, because of the fact that they are subject to Section 23B read together with 23M. And one of the criteria for an employee to be able to claim home office expenses is that the room must be used exclusively for trade purposes, which I can tell you straight off, mine isn't. So as an independent contractor, I can claim my home office. As an employee, I would not be able to. So please do just keep those restrictions in mind. It is something which is not always automatically and immediately obvious. It's something which we would have to think about and deal with. Right, so that's where I want to leave home office expenses, and we'll move on to the next issue.